Hi everyone, welcome back to the Pot Smoker's Bible. My name is Zion. I'm the author of the Pot Smoker's Bible, which contains the prophetic book of Zion, where I get my name and authority. It comes from the Ketuvim, or Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible. I use the King James Version of the Christian Bible to put together the prophecy of Israel from the scattered bits and pieces of the testimony of the various Old Testament prophets. The reason I did that is because I was raised a Christian, and that was the book that I was familiar with, and because King James happens to have been one of my relatives, so it's the family Bible. Anyway, um, when I followed the instructions left to me by Isaiah, and I put together the prophecy from, like I said, scattered bits and pieces, and it became the Book of Zion. The Book of Zion, I published it on 420, or I started publishing it on 420 by doing these videos on YouTube and then again on social media. And I did that in order to complete my prerequisite to be authorized as Zion of the Most High God of Israel, the prophet foretold 3,000 years ago. And the prophecy outlines the year 2020 in perfect, clear, undeniable detail. And it judges the world, this society, based on the events of the year 2020. And in keeping with that, keeping that in mind, I am going to go ahead with my reading. I'm working with the 21st chapter of the Potsmoker's Bible, which contains the 18th chapter of the Book of Zion. It's called The Sighing of the Prisoners, and I'm going to take up where I left off, because that was the last thing on my to-do list, which is to publish peace. If you're reading this, I am Zion, because the only way that I could not be Zion was if you never read this or saw this. The reason that is so is because this book is a controversy waiting to happen. That is its purpose. The very fact that anyone using drugs would use the Bible as a defense for that drug use is to this society the most controversial thing imaginable. And that very controversy will be the very means by which the prophecy will play out as foretold. This book tells you that those who use drugs are a new kind of human. We have become gray, a hybrid human species created by the gray aliens to be an interpreter, an advocate for the gray. We are priests who are created to bring to humanity a better way to live. This book says that God, the Gray, created drug users to save life on Earth. We are humans who have learned to be all that we can be through our drug use. How can this book not be controversial? And it's this controversy that will end the war on drugs and set our entire species on a more humane path. Because the imprisonment of my people is a grave injustice that was never supposed to be so horrific. We had to be created. So this controversy was necessary to end the war on Zion. And do not be fooled. The war on drugs is a war against the people of Zion. That is what defines us. Drugs are objects. Objects are by their very nature inanimate. They are not able to perform actions. Drugs don't do anything, let alone wage a war. Drugs are used by people. Therefore, the war on drugs is in actuality a war against the people who use drugs. We who use drugs are the prophetic people known as Zion. Don't be fooled. I do want society to understand a very important point. None of this had to be. The world is full of prophecies. Most are never realized. This one is played out because we humans weren't wise enough to avoid it. If humans had found a way to overcome our greed and violence, none of this would have happened. But we did not. We walked right into this, and we have no one to blame but ourselves. That being said, since we have chosen this path of destruction, we must now walk this path. Drug users did not do any harm to society that required the government to declare drugs illegal. At the most, a small minority of the human population did harm to themselves and to those close to them, which is part of human nature. Drug use doesn't cause true damage to the entire population. It only affects a small portion of the overall population. As I have already stated, the Grey planned this out 3,000 years ago. They led us down this path, not to do us harm, but to protect themselves and to help us, their children, to grow up. The dire need of both species required our isolation. That isolation required the severing of communications, so that the means had to be created to ensure the survival of both species and the means to reconnect telepathically with us when the time came. This plan was never perfect. It was a means to ensure survival of both species. Yes, they needed us more than we needed them, but we would never have existed without them because we are part of them. So we, as their children, should respect their needs. As I said, it was never a perfect plan. The Grey are not perfect, just as I am not perfect. And you are not perfect. I don't believe in a perfect anything. The Grey don't have all the answers. They are not G-O-D, God. They are God, those who from the heavens came. And to believe in anything, any being that is perfect, is just not very realistic. So our imperfect creators did the best they could to help us survive and grow without them. Now they have returned as promised, and as they promised, so they will do. They will be here when we, their children, call on them. That is the promise of our Creator God. They are not like us. They did not wage war. They do not wage war. They did in the past, but they don't anymore. They do not lie. They do not impose their will upon us without need. They do not abuse nature or use money. They do not do harm to others for sport, or cheat, or steal, or bully, or any other human trait that does harm. They are not primitive like us. So, the sighing of the prisoners does bother them. They stand ready to give us aid. They see our pain and suffering. They have found me, a willing human gray, willing to be their voice on earth. So that together we can end this cruel abuse of power by heartless men who enjoy their self-righteous false beliefs that they have the right to impose their will on others. The state has gotten away with it because no one stood up to call foul until now. Now the Gray and I stand together to oppose an unjust abuse of power. The fulfillment of prophecy is an unstoppable force that has already been set in motion. The promise made to Abraham long ago will be kept. Israel and Zion will be protected. The God of Israel will appear at the call of the people of Zion. They will come in spaceships. They will. They will come to prove to humanity that they alone are the physical gods of earth. And God, even with a little g, is an unstoppable force that has shaped humanity from the day they created us. The God of earth is gray. They will come to earth just as they did before, in spaceships, bearing gifts for humanity. A parent race that had to leave us so that they could return, as promised, in spaceships. They predicted that in their absence we would degenerate into our baser nature, as all primitive sentient beings tend to do. But the addition of our gray DNA altered our abilities. It enhanced our ability to do both harm and good. Most of us chose to do harm. The captivity of Zion, as we humans call it, the war on drugs, is an example of this enhanced effect. Cruel, inhumane, without logic or moral justification. What more can the state take away from my people? Yes, they already have everything, but you do not have our heart. We are Zion. You can try to destroy us through your so-called war, but we are gray. We have overcome our baser human nature. You can try to force us to be like you, but you cannot succeed. The knowledge contained in the prophecy, by its very nature, will ensure that the war ends. We who are the imprisoned are not going to allow ourselves to forever remain under your controls. Nature dictates that we will rise up to overthrow our oppressor, just like every other oppressed people on earth. We just need a reason, and the prophecy is that reason. So may the gray watch over you, guide you, protect you, and keep you from all harm. May they teach you right from wrong, and may you be worthy of them. May your thoughts, words, and deeds reflect truth, good, and light, the unicorn way, Find your joy and pursue it. Stay happy and high. If you use drugs, you have every right and reason to. Believe me, I know, I wrote the books. I'm going to say later now, because I love you way too much to ever say goodbye.